Okay, welcome back, Year 10. So we are on lesson 3 of the Living World Ecosystems Introduction section. This is the last lesson of introduction before we start to look at the first of our different ecosystems. So today we're going to be looking at biomes, and it's important that by the end of this lesson you understand what a biome is and you understand how climate links to biome distribution around the world. So basically why we find certain biomes in the places that we do find them. Just a reminder from the last few lessons, this is the booklet that the activities we do are coming from. If you don't have the paper copy and if you haven't managed to get hold of a paper copy by yet, don't worry, you can download it from Show My Homework, or you can just copy out the particular page that we'll be using today, which is page 26. So, as a little bit of background, last week we were looking at small scale ecosystems, and we talked about how small scale ecosystems like a singular pond or a small forest can be really easily interfered with by humans and changed by humans. Today we're looking at completely the other end of the spectrum. So we're looking at global biomes, and these are huge scale ecosystems which cover whole countries or sometimes even whole continents, such as the tropical rainforest biome, which covers huge parts of South America, parts of equatorial Africa and Asia. So the first thing I want you to do is pause this video, and then I'd like you to have a think, how many different biomes can you name? You should be able to come up with, I think, at least 5. So pause this video, have a think, write them down, and we'll see if you're right. So there are 8 main biomes that you need to know some information about. Not a huge amount of information, and a lot of this is things that you might already know or things you might be able to work out from your common sense. But there are 8 different biomes, and they are in this key on the right hand side here. So we've got tundra, coniferous forest, temperate deciduous forest, temperate grassland, Mediterranean, desert, tropical rainforest, tropical grassland, and then there are some others which we won't be looking at in any detail today. So with biomes, they exist and they're different from the biomes that are around them because of the location that they're in. So each biome has a different climate, different vegetation, different animals. Some may have a bit of crossover between the animals and plants that they get there, but generally they have their own sets of plants and animals that are adapted to live in that particular type of ecosystem. And they're found in the places that they are found because of the climate. So we're going to take a little look back to some of the work that we did in our last topic of the challenge of natural hazards, and everybody's favourite model, the global atmospheric circulation model. So remember when we looked at this model, it was important to understand it not just because it looks impressive or because it looks really complicated and makes you sound smart. You needed to be able to understand what happens in the atmosphere and how heat transfers from place to place, because you need to understand why rainforests have hot, wet and humid climates and deserts have hot and dry climates, and why the UK has the temperate climate that we have. So where we have seasons, we have hotter periods like we're having at the moment, cooler periods, and why we don't tend to have particular extremes of temperature. So as a little recap of that, in the UK, we are very much in the middle. We're kind of average in terms of our climate. We don't have extremely hot temperatures or extremely cool temperatures. We might feel like we do because we can have days where it's up in the 30s in terms of temperature in the summer, and it can be as cool as 5 or 6 degrees sometimes when it's in the middle of winter. But we have this kind of weather because we are in the middle of a low pressure and a high pressure area. So we are at the front of where those two areas meet. And when we have low pressure, that means that the air is rising up from the surface. And as that air rises upwards, remember it gets heated at the surface by the sun, it cools as it moves away from the ground where the heat is, it condenses, forms clouds and raindrops, and that's why we have cloudy and wet weather. So we tend to have that kind of weather generally over spring, autumn, but as I'm sure you're aware, we get rainy and cloudy weather during all seasons. On the other hand, when we have high pressure weather that comes towards us, that means that the air is sinking down to the ground. Remember, it's pushing down onto the surface of the ground, which is why it's called high pressure. And sinking air means that there is no evaporation of water, no condensation, no rain clouds are formed. We have beautiful blue skies, much like we're having at the moment. So we have a combination of those two types of pressure systems, and that's why we have the climate that we have. That's also why we have the vegetation that we have. We tend to have grass coverage, we have abundant forests, we have huge trees, etc. We don't have sandy coverage, we don't have rainforest type trees because of the climate that we have. On the other hand, at 30 degrees north and south of the equator, in that area there, we have a high pressure system here. So where the air isn't rising, again, in the same way as we have our hot and dry weather or clear and dry weather in the UK, in our 30 degrees north and south latitudes, it's where we find our deserts. So here we have sinking air, we don't have any rising, cooling, condensing, forming of clouds. Air is sinking here, and that means it doesn't have any moisture in it, so it's incredibly dry and also incredibly hot. At the equator, conversely, we have rising air here. We have low air pressure. The air is all rising upwards from the surface, and because of that rising air, the air is cooling, condensing, forming raindrops, forming clouds, and therefore, losing the name, you have rainforests. And it happens so regularly that you can almost predict what time of the day it is by the time that the rain happens. So that's why we get rainforests at the equator, and why we get deserts slightly further away from the equator. So now it's over to you. Your task for today, for the remainder of this lesson, you should have about 45 minutes, is to do some research on each of the biomes that are listed in the table on the right of your screen at the moment, which has come from the Living World booklet. So this is page 26 in that booklet, if you have it. What you need to do is either fill in this table, so do the research using the textbook is a really good place to start. Remember, you've got online access to the textbook, page 56 and 57. You need to fill in the locations, so whereabouts would you find this biome? So if we take, for instance, the tundra biome, you would most likely find this kind of cold but not necessarily covered in snow and ice. You'd most likely find this in places like Russia, Canada, Alaska, places like that. Biotic features, remember, biotic are the living features, the living things. So essentially we're talking here the plants and animals. They are going to be different for each ecosystem, each biome, and you should be able to find at least one example of a plant and one example of an animal from each biome. In that last column, abiotic features, that's where you talk about all the non-living things. So we're talking rocks, soil, climate. Climate's a really important thing that you need to make sure that you have got some information about. Is it hot all year round? Is it dry? And for those of you that are looking for some extra challenge, I will also be attaching to show my homework some boxes of information which explain the climate and why a particular biome is found in the place that it is in the world. So it's a link basically from what the ecosystem's like to what the climate is like to cause that, and that's really important for those of you looking for grade 6, 7, 8, 9. So have a go at it. If you struggle with it, that's absolutely fine. That's what your teachers are here for. But I do really recommend that you have a look at those boxes of information and try to include that information into either your table, or the other way you can do this task is to present your information around a world map. So you need to take a world map if you're able to print it off. If you can't print it off, it might be a bit more difficult to do this one. You need to shade roughly where you would find each of the 8 main biomes onto your world map. It's quite fiddly, so you don't need to be super precise about all of the little individual areas of rainforest, for example. And then you need to make sure you have a box or a section of information on each of the 8 biomes. And that information needs to have all the same things in it as the table does. So the location, where would you find it? What are the abiotic features, the non-living things like the climate and the rocks and soil? And what are the biotic features, the plants and animals like? So that's your task. Your teachers will let you know if they want you to submit this work or not via Show My Homework. Good luck.